The class this evening is sponsored by Dvorah and Yuri Shliansky, Dvorah Topper and Yuri Shliansky, just to thank the rabbis for offering these classes, and we certainly to thank all of the support that we've received, because our strength is only as good as the support that we receive from the community, and by coming to the classes. It wouldn't be any good if we were giving classes if nobody was coming. So shkayach to everybody for keeping the learning alive. And the class is co-sponsored tonight by my parents, who are zooming in to learn with us, and my brother also is here, and the class is co-sponsored in memory of my grandfather, Ephraim ben Simcha's neshama should go to the highest points of Gan Eden. I want to discuss this evening, we're right now in this mini-series of Great Debates, Great Deciders, Great Decisions, Great Deciders, leading up to Shavuos, coming from Har Meron to Har Sinai, where last week we spoke about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was, as we spoke about, one of the greatest personalities, rabbinic personalities that ever came into the scene, and we live by his Torah. And we spoke about all of the tremendous contributions that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai gave us, just in written form, but also the perspective that he gave. What I want to discuss tonight is arguably the great decider, who is the greatest decider, the greatest Talmudic scholar to ever lived. And we're going to see even potentially a greater Talmudic scholar than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And this is none other than the greatest Talmudic scholar, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was born somewhere in the first half of the first century, and he died somewhere around the year right in the first quarter of the second century, probably around the year 115, 120 CE, somewhere around then. Rabbi Akiva came from very humble beginnings, as the Gemara tells us right over here in Maseches Pesachim on Daf Mem Tes. The Gemara says, Tanya Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, Rabbi Akiva, Kishayiti Ama Aretz, when I was an ignoramus, Amarti, I said, Mi'itain li Talmud Chacham, that if someone were to give me a Talmudic scholar, ve'eshkenu kachamor, that I would bite him like a donkey, that he was so brazen, he just disliked Torah scholars so much that if someone were to present to him a Torah scholar, he would bite them like a donkey. Amrulo Talmida, the student said to him, that's a pretty strong statement, but they said, Rebbe, and more kikelev. I guess it's more common for a dog to bite than a donkey, so why didn't you say a kelev? So Rabbi Akiva responds and he says, Amr lahen, zen noshech v'shover etzem v'zen noshech v'eino shover etzem. That the bite of a donkey is so strong, it doesn't just break skin, but it breaks bone. That's how much I dislike Talmidei Chachamim. Now, Tosas and Ksubis, before you think that Rabbi Akiva was some bloodthirsty, cannibalistic guy, the Tosas and Ksubis on Daf Samach Beis and Beis explains that, Rabbi Akiva was not an irreligious person. He was a religious person the first 40 years of his life, and then afterwards, we know, of course. But he was always religious. He was brought up religious. In fact, Rabbi Akiva is referred to in the Talmud as Akiva ben Yosef. His father was a ger. He was brought up in a religious environment. He was married twice. His first marriage, unfortunately, his wife passed away at a young age, and he had a son from that marriage, Rabbi Yeshua, who we know is one of our great Tanaim, Rabbi Yeshua, who is actually referred to in the Talmud as Yeshua ben Karcha, Yeshua, the son of the bald one. Rabbi Akiva, one of his nicknames was Baldy. It's a story for another time. But generally speaking, Rabbi Akiva, at this time, Akiva was a religious person. So what did he hate so much about the Torah scholars? What he hated so much is that they had a certain they had a pompous attitude, up on their high horse. He couldn't stand how they sat in their ivory towers and were so full of themselves. He didn't like the way that Talmidei Chachamim at the time presented themselves, and it turned him off so much. But this is the way Rabbi Akiva started. He started with these humble beginnings, and then take a look at this Gemara. The Gemara says that we said maybe Rabbi Akiva was even greater as a Talmudic scholar, even as a Torah scholar, maybe even greater than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. The Gemara says the following: Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda said name Rav, B'shah sha'ala Moshe l'morom. When Moshe Rabbeinu went up on Har Sinai, we're about to celebrate the holiday of Shavuos, that after Moshe Rabbeinu was up on the mountain after the mass revelation, he was up on the mountain for 40 days in order so that he can bring us the luchos. So when Moshe Rabbeinu was up in the marom, ascended on high, that he found that God was writing the crowns on top of the letters in the Torah. That some of the letters in the Torah come with crowns on top, and he saw God carefully writing and drawing these crowns on top of some of the letters in the Torah. Amr Lafanov, Moshe said, Rabbanu Shalom, he said, Master of the universe, Mima Akiva al Yadcha, that what you couldn't fit everything you needed to fit, everything you needed to teach, you couldn't fit inside of the written text of the Torah. You need to add these crowns. Like there's something that we couldn't learn from what's simply written in the text. You needed to add these illustrations, this new dimension. What's the purpose of it? Mima akiv al yadcha, that is there something missing from your hands? Amar lo, God says to Moshe, Adam echad yesh she'aseh liyos besof kamadoros, that there's going to be a person that is going to be living many generations from now. Akiva ben Yosef Shemo. His name is Akiva, the son of Yosef, who is a convert. He hasn't come onto the scene yet, but in many generations from now, he will be a tremendous Talmid Chacham. She'asid lidrosh al kol kotz ukotz tilin utilin shel halachos, who's going to have the ability to expound on and explain each and every thorn, each and every tiny little piece of the Torah, even these crowns. Amr Lafanov. So Moshe says, Rabbonu Shalom, the master of the universe, Haruli, can you show him to me? So they went into God's time machine. Amr lo chozer la'acharecha, turn around. And Moshe turns around and he enters into the classroom of Rebbe Akiva. Halach v'yashav besof shmona shuros. That Moshe Rabbeinu went, and he sat in the back in an unassuming way, not to disrupt the learning that was taking place. He went and he sat in the back of Rabbi Akiva's classroom. V'lo hayodea mahin omrim, and he had no clue what they were talking about. He was totally lost from the conversation. The Torah that Rabbi Akiva was teaching was at such a high level that it was actually going over the head of Moshe Rabbeinu himself and Tishesh Kocho. And Moshe Rabbeinu became ill because of how he became so uneased of the fact that there was Torah that he couldn't understand. And then they came to Rabbi Akiva was starting to teach a certain topic. Amrlo Talmidav, and the students asked Rabbi Akiva, they said, Rebbe, minalan lacha, where do you know this specific teaching? We're not sure exactly what Rabbi Akiva was teaching, but he was teaching something specific that the Talmidim wanted to know. What's your source? Where are you backing yourself up from? Because they were looking through the Chumash and they couldn't find a source to what their teacher was teaching them, to what Rabbi Akiva was teaching. Amar lahen, he says to them, halach l'Moshe Messinai, that this is part of the halacha l'Moshe Messinai. This is part of the tradition we receive from Har Sinai. And remember, we spoke about that what happened at Har Sinai is that we received 613 mitzvos and 613 principles, really, of ideas of how to understand the Torah. So this, what Rabbi Akiva was teaching, was part of that Masorah. Nisyash v'dato, and then Moshe Rabbeinu was able to be at ease. Chazer ubal lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he comes back to God. Amr Lafanav, he says, Rabbonu Shalom, Master of the universe, Yesh Lecha Adam Kazeh, V'ata Notein Torah Al Yadi. You have such a person. You have Rabbi Akiva, someone who's able to explain kol kotes v'kotes, every single small little detail of the Torah that even I can't understand. And yet you're choosing me to be the person who teaches the Torah to the Jewish people. Why not have Akiva ben Yosef? Why not have Rabbi Akiva be the person that does it? Don't choose me, choose him. Amar lo, God says to Moshe, shtok, shh, be quiet, enough. You're not the one who's calling the shots. Kach Allah b'machshal lefanai. This is what I've chosen to do. Meaning, you can't ask questions. Lo machshavi machshavoseichem. That my way of thinking is not your way of thinking. I know what I'm doing. Don't ask questions on me, Moshe. Okay. The question that we have to look into is Moshe Rabbeinu, this lowly farmer who came from very humble beginnings, to the point that he couldn't stand Torah scholars because of their attitude that they had of being, so full of themselves and understanding all of the Torah. They felt as though they knew everything, and they acted and they walked and they talked like they knew everything. And then he becomes this person who knows more Torah than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Now, don't get confused. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Navi that ever was and ever will be. The Rambam says that if you don't believe that, then you are you're a heretic. No question about it. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Navi, was the greatest prophet. But in terms of breadth and depth of Torah knowledge and understanding, the Gemara is making it clear that Rabbi Akiva was above everyone else. How does one go from being this almost like footnote of Jewish history, just being a regular Joe, to becoming the greatest Torah scholar to ever walk the face of this planet? So take a look at this Tosfos. This Tosfos is, it's a Tosfos that you can't help but tear up when you learn it. But in order to properly appreciate the Tosfos, I have to give you a little bit of background information to Rabbi Akiva meeting his second wife, Rachel. This is unbelievable. It's a love story for the ages. Rabbi Akiva, as we mentioned, was a farmer, and he was hired to work for one of the richest men in Yerushalayim, if not the richest man in Yerushalayim. His name was Kalba Savua. Now, Kalba Savua wasn't his actual name. I don't know his actual name, but his name was Kalba Savua because he was so involved with philanthropy and was so giving of himself that whoever would come to his house that was hungry, they were hungry like a dog. They were like, they needed to eat. They would walk out of their house savua. They would walk out of the house satiated. That's how he got his nickname, Kalba Savua, that he would make people that were hungry like dogs into satisfied. So Kalba Savua, excuse me one moment. So Kalba Savua hired Akiva. And Akiva was this, farm boy, not a Talmud Chacham at all by any stretch of the means. We're going to see later he didn't even know the Aleph Beis. We're going to see that Avos of Nassan later, that Brisa later, that Rabbi Akiva didn't even know the Aleph Beis. He knew less than my 4-year-old daughter about Torah. He knew nothing, but he was a religious man, and Kalba Savua had a daughter. Her name was Rachel, and Rachel noticed this individual, Akiva, and she was taken by him. She wasn't taken necessarily by his looks. She wasn't taken necessarily by his work ethic. You know what she was taken by? She was taken by his potential. She saw something in Akiva ben Yosef that no one until now had ever seen before. And the two of them, they started a relationship, and Rachel, along with Akiva, go over to Kalba Savua, and Rachel says to her father, I would like to marry him. And her father, as you could imagine, the richest man in Yerushalayim, someone who had prospects for her daughter coming from everywhere, that any great Torah scholar that you could think of was lining up to get the best dowry in Yerushalayim. I mean, we're talking about the richest man in Yerushalayim that was also a religious man, who was someone that was a Baal Chesed. I mean, this is a great family, and Rachel obviously is a good girl, and therefore she could marry anyone she wants. Why would you settle on the farm boy? Kaba Savua wasn't having it, to the point that he made a neder, he made a vow, he made an oath that, Rachel, if you get married to Akiva, I'm cutting both of you off completely. I'm cutting away your trust, everything cut off completely. You will not be able to get any hana from me. You will not be able to enjoy any of my wealth. Nothing, not even my presence, will cut off all communication whatsoever, which, by the way, is halachically binding. This is something that people don't necessarily realize. The idea of an oath is a real thing. The idea of a neder, of a vow, that, let's say if someone were to say that I'm vowing off M&Ms, that I want to treat M&Ms like they're hektish, right? Like something that's kadosh, that's supposed to be brought up to God. That's the way I want to treat M&Ms, to the point that I can't eat them at all. If someone were to eat an M&M after saying something like that it would be like eating treif. It would be like eating, a number 4 at McDonald's. That you would get lashes for such a thing, for eating those M&Ms. Kalba Savua is making a real oath right now that if the two of you marry, that's it, you're cut off completely. And therefore, I would be taking a risk that if you were to try and get anything from me, I would be liable to get lashes. I'd be punished by the rabbinical court. Rachel and Akiva went ahead and they got married. That's it. To the point that the Gemara tells us in Ksubis and Nedarim that they lived on the streets. They had absolutely no money. Akiva obviously lost his job. He couldn't work for Kaba Savua anymore. They couldn't live in his mansion. They were out on the streets. They lived in a little straw house that they made. That's what they lived in, like the story of the 3 little pigs. Like that. That's what Rabbi Akiva and his wife Rachel, the tzaddikus, were living in. At a certain point, Rachel says to her husband, she says, "Listen, I didn't marry you just so that I could end up living like this. I married you because I saw potential in you. Go learn in yeshiva." And that day, Rabbi Akiva went for 12 years, did not see his wife, went to go learn in yeshiva, came back a Talmud Chacham. As he's about to approach the house, he hears from inside their house, their little straw hut, that his wife Rachel has a friend over. And this friend, with friends like these, who needs enemies? Because this friend is saying to Rachel, you're crazy that you let your husband go learn in yeshiva like this. Being completely insensitive to the fact that the last 12 years she hasn't seen her husband. And Rachel says, "I really do not appreciate what you're saying," to the point that if he were to come back right now and knock on the door and walk inside, I would send him back for another 12 years. Rabbi Akiva doesn't even open the door. He doesn't knock. He doesn't say hello. At that moment that he heard his wife say, "Go back for another 12 years, he turned around, went back for another 12 years. 24 years they haven't seen each other. At this point, at the end of these 24 years, Akiva has become the Gadol Hador. He is the greatest Torah scholar to ever walk the face of the planet. Probably at some point during those 24 years or right after is when he was giving that class that Moshe Rabbeinu was at. He is the greatest Torah scholar to ever walk the face of the planet. He comes back to Yerushalayim, he comes back, and they throw a major parade. The Gadol Hador is coming to town. And they have this huge, massive asifa that all of Klal Yisrael coming to greet the Gadol Hador, Rabbi Akiva. Into the party walks Rachel, so that she could see her husband. So the bouncers at the door don't know who this lady is that wants to be able to come see Rabbi Akiva. And Akiva looks at everyone in the room and stops the entire crowd and says, "Shali v'shalachem," whatever I have, whatever merit I have, and whatever merit you have from my learning is all shalahi. It's all thanks to her. She comes in, sits next to him. They join together again. Why am I telling you all this? For the next part of the story. This is an unbelievable scene that happened next. Who do you think shows up next to the party? Kalba Savua, Rabbi Akiva's father-in-law. Now he comes in. Why does he come in? He doesn't come in because he thinks his son-in-law is there. Again, he hasn't seen his son-in-law or spoken or heard from his daughter in 24 years. No clue what they look like at this point. He wouldn't imagine that this Akiva ben Yosef farm boy that didn't know the Aleph Beis became the greatest Torah scholar that ever walked the face of the planet. So why is he coming? He's coming because he's the wealthiest man in Yerushalayim. He's a philanthropist. He wants to be able to see how he can help the Gadol Hador. So he comes in, and of course the crowd splits because Kalba Savua is here. And Rabbi Akiva stands up and he looks at Kalba Savua and he says, I'm sorry, but I can't let you in. He says, why not? He says, because I am Akiva ben Yosef. I'm married to your daughter Rachel. Do you remember what happened 24 years ago? Kalba Savua's face goes white. He is in total shock. And he says, I had no clue that you would become someone like this. I would have never made the vow if that was the case. So Rabbi Akiva at that point mattered his neder. He got together a Beis Din, and the Beis Din nullified his vow, which we do before Rosh Hashanah. We nullify our vows. Before Yom Kippur, we nullify our vows in order so we could start the year on the right foot without anything else tying us down. And so that's what Rabbi Akiva did for his father-in-law, Kalba Savua. He was mater his neder, and they were able to join again because the oath no longer applied, and therefore there is nothing halachically binding preventing them from being together again. It's an amazing story. It's an absolutely amazing story. But Tosfos, right here in Ksubis, right over here, Tosfos points out something, though, that makes the story very difficult. It's a lovely story. It would make a great Disney movie, no question about it. But from a strictly halachic perspective, from a Torah perspective, the story is missing one very important piece. And it's the following. Ve'im Tomar asked Tosfos, V'halo aser liftoach benolad. The Gemara in Nedarim, Adaf Samach Daled, teaches us a very important halacha about absolving oaths. That when someone takes an oath, they need to have thought of all of the potential reasons why they would want to get rid of the oath. But if there's something that's an impossibility, something that would never happen, like for example, I take an oath, let's say before this this pandemic that was going on, someone took an oath that they did not want to get any hana from Zoom. From Zoom, they never want to get any pleasure from this teleconference, video conference technology called Zoom. And then there's a pandemic that hits that no one would have ever seen coming. Maybe some people thought that there would have been a virus, watch videos of Bill Gates from 2015. Okay, fine. But the average person would have never thought that something like this would be happening, that we would be completely reliant on something like Zoom. Says the Gemara Nedarim, one cannot absolve their oath based on the reason of, I really need it now. Why? Because it was an impossibility. You never thought when you took the oath that possibility would have ever happened. And therefore, you're not allowed to absolve the oath. When Kalba Savua, Rabbi Akiva's father-in-law, took the oath that I'm cutting off you and Rachel, he took the oath because he would have never in a million years assumed that Rabbi Akiva would become a Talmid Chacham. Had he thought that there was a potential for him to become a Talmid Chacham, then he would have never taken the oath in the first place. He would have had no issue of them getting married. But he took the oath because he knew there was no way that Rabbi Akiva would ever become a Talmid Chacham, let alone the Gadol Hador. So strictly speaking then, the oath is not able to be resolved. This is the major question that Tosfos asks. The answer that Tosfos gives, you can't help but tear up when he gives his answer. The Im Tomar, Tosfos answers as follows. The Hacha lo chashiv nolad. This is not called an impossibility. It's not an impossibility for someone to become a Rabbi Akiva. Kivan, because shahalach libi rav the derechu b'holech lilmod shenase adam gadol. Because if someone has their heart committed to becoming a Talmid Chacham, then they become a Talmid Chacham. If someone goes to yeshiva, the derechu b'holech lilmod, that if someone goes to learn Torah, shenase adam gadol, it is a guarantee that you'll become a gadol. It's a guarantee that you'll become a great Talmid Chacham, like Rabbi Akiva. Just if you go to learn, it's gonna happen. So Kabba Savua assumed that at some point Rabbi Akiva would at least go to the Beis Medrash, and if that's the case, then all the rest becomes history. All you have to do is just walk into the Beis Medrash. You open up a Gemara, you open up a Chumash, you go to one class, and then if you commit yourself, then it's a guarantee, not an impossibility, that you'll become a Talmid Chacham. The question is that, how did Rabbi Akiva do it? I mean, I went to yeshiva. I didn't go just one time, but I went to yeshiva. I was in yeshiva for more than 10 years. So if I was in yeshiva for more than 10 years, and before then I was in a yeshiva high school, and I was in a Hebrew day school, and I'm no Rabbi Akiva. So how does one become a Rabbi Akiva? I went to yeshiva, but it didn't happen. How does one do it? Tosfos is not the first person to come up with this idea. God actually came up with this idea. There's a pasuk in Chumash that says it. The Torah says in Parshas Nitzavim, in Perek Lamed Halacha Yudalid of Sefer Dvarim, the Torah says, Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od. Because coming close to God, becoming a great individual, becoming a great Jew is something that's karov elecha. It's something that's close to you, but not just karov elecha, not just close, but it's karov elecha hadavar me'od. It's very close. When God says that something is that's unquantifiable. However close you think it is, it's even closer than that. It's karov elecha hadavar me'od. It's up to you to do. All you have to do is just do it, and you're going to become great. So, but I'm trying. I'm doing it. So how does one actually achieve it? You go to yeshiva, you learn something, you come to a class, but we don't walk away. You're becoming Rabbi Akiva. So how does one actually do it? So I'd like to point to three Gemaras, three stories about Rabbi Akiva that I think are very telling to how one does it. How does one do it? How does one actually achieve this goal, that they become a Rabbi Akiva? So I'd like to just share three stories. We're going to move through them relatively quickly because of the time. But when we look at a common theme through each of these stories, we're going to walk away realizing that it's because Rabbi Akiva possessed something very unique. Take a look at the Avos to Rav Nassan. Avos to Rav Nassan was written by the great Tana, Rav Nassan, and it's different stories and teachings, ethical teachings about our Tanaim. So he tells the story about Rabbi Akiva in Perek Vav of the Avos to Rav Nassan. He says, "Ma hayatilaso Rabbi Akiva." How did Rabbi Akiva get his start? So his wife sends him away to go learn. His wife Rachel says, "Okay, go learn." So now he's ready to go learn. So what happened? Amru, Ben Arbaim Shana Haya Velo Shana Klum. He was 40 years old and he had yet to learn anything. Pam Achas Haya Omed Alpi Habe'er. One day he was by the well. Amar, and he said to the other people standing there, Mi Chakak Eben Zu. Who created the cavity inside of this stone that holds the water? Who? You go to the Grand Canyon, you look at the Grand Canyon, I'm saying, who created that cavity? How did it become created? Amrlo, Hamayim Shetager Noflin Aleha. They said to Rabbi Akiva, it's basic science, because the water that drips on it consistently eventually makes a hole in the stone, and that's how the well was created. It falls on it every day. Amr lo Akiva. Akiva says to them, they said to Rabbi Akiva, they said, they pointed to a pasuk in Eov that says the same thing, that, when water falls on a rock, it ends up creating a hole. Miyad, right away, Rabbi Akiva said to himself, Hay Rabbi Akiva dan kavachamer ba'atzmo. He thought to himself that if this is what happens to a stone, then certainly it would happen to me. Ma'arach pasalas hakasha. Just as water is something that's malleable, something that's soft, something it's soft like water, is able to break away at this hard rock, divrei Torah, then certainly the words of Torah, shekashe kebarzel, that is strong like steel, alachas kama v'kama, certainly, shechachu es libi, shehu basar v'dam, is able to penetrate my heart, which is made of just flesh and blood. Rabbi Akiva saw the water dripping on the stone and was able to derive from there that just as the water is able to penetrate the stone, so too Torah is able to penetrate my heart. Take a look at this next teaching. Found in the Gemara. The Gemara teaches us in Maseches Makos. This is probably one of the most famous stories of Rabbi Akiva, and it's actually a treat to be able to learn this story the evening of Yom Yerushalayim, as we're celebrating 50 plus years of sovereignty, Jewish sovereignty over Yerushalayim. Take a look at this Gemara. Shuv Pamacha. So the Gemara at the end of Makos has two stories about Rabbi Akiva and his friends, that they were walking to Yerushalayim. This is after the Romans destroyed the temple. Yerushalayim is in ruins, and they're walking, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this teaching. And Rabbi Akiva and his friends, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yeshua, they're walking along. They went up to Yerushalayim. When they got to Har Tzofim, they tore Kriya, they ripped their clothes because they saw the destruction of Jerusalem. When they came to the Temple Mount, Ra'u Shu'al, they saw a fox or a jackal coming out of the Holy of Holies. Can you imagine seeing such a thing? Especially, it was so raw then that they lived through the Churban. They saw the Churban Abayis, and now they're seeing a fox walking on the Har Habayis, walking on the Holy of Holies. His chilu hein bochin. Their friends, Rabbi Akiva's friends, started to cry. Rabbi Akiva mitzachek, and Rabbi Akiva started laughing. Amrulo, they said to him, Rabbi Akiva, are you so callous? Well, how can you start laughing seeing this fox, seeing this jackal walking along the Har Habayis, walking around the Kodesh Kedashim? Amr lahem, he said to them, hold on, why are you guys crying? Amr lo, what do you mean? Why are we crying? Makom shekasabo, the same place in which the Torah says, Hazar hakarev yumas, that if a non-Kohen enters it, they die immediately from entering the Kodesh Kedashim. V'achshav shualim holchubo. Now there are foxes walking through the Holy of Holies below Nivka, and we're not going to cry. How can that be? Such horrible destruction that we're watching in front of our eyes. Amr lahen, Rabbi Akiva says to them, it's exactly for that reason. It's exactly for the reason that the fox is walking on the Kodesh Kadashim, walking on the Holy of Holies, that I'm laughing. Dekasiv, because he points to a pasuk, that the pasuk in Yeshayahu connects Uriah HaKohen and Zechariah Hanavi. V'chima inin Uriah etzel Zechariah. What's the connection between Uriah, who lived during the first temple, and Zechariah, who lived during the second temple? Uriah b'mikdash rishon v'Zechariah b'mikdash sheni. Ella Tala HaKasav, rather the verse connects Zechariah and Uriah because Nivu'asol shel Zechariah v'Nivu'asol shel Uriah, they connect the two prophecies of Uriah and Zechariah. But Uriah Ksiv, the prophecy of Uriah says, L'chein beglalchem Tzion tzadeh techaresh, that the land of Yerushalayim is going to be plowed over, it's going to be destroyed, it's going to be in ruins. This is the nevuah, this is the prophecy that Uriah had during the first temple period, that the temple was going to be destroyed. And Zechariah Navi said, after the temple was already destroyed, Zechariah said, Od Yishvu Zakenim Zakenos B'Rechovi Yerushalayim. That the day is going to come when the great Talmidei Chachamim and the great elders are going to once again be walking through the streets of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is going to be rebuilt, and we're starting to see this before our eyes. It's an unbelievable thing we're starting to experience. We're starting to live it. We're in a generation that literally this Gemara is coming alive. That the Zakenim and the Zakenos, the righteous elders of Yerushalayim, are sitting again learning Torah. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky used to say that, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was one of the greatest Talmidei Chachamim to live in the 20th century. He passed away in 1994. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was one of the Gedolim that lived in Yerushalayim. He lived in the Shari Chesed neighborhood of Yerushalayim. He was beloved by everyone, but he had an unbelievably sharp mind. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah V'das in Brooklyn, used to say about Rav Shlomo Zalman, he used to say that during my Shmona Esrei, I don't think about Rav Shlomo Zalman during the bracha of Ala Tzadikim, when I daven for the righteous of the generation. But I think about Rav Shlomo Zalman during the bracha of Yerushalayim Ircha, when I say the bracha about Yerushalayim. That's when I think about Rav Shlomo Zalman, because he is a testimony of the fact that Yerushalayim is being rebuilt again. The Mir Yeshiva is a testimony of the fact that Yerushalayim is being rebuilt again. 7,000 students learning in the Mir Yerushalayim, hopefully will open again soon with a Kol Torah in the Beis Medrash. We're experiencing Yerushalayim in its rebuilding stages. This is unbelievable. The Nevuah is coming alive. Says Rabbi Akiva, just as the Nevuah, just as the prophecy as Uriah came true, that Yerushalayim was destroyed, until that happened, I was nervous maybe that the Nevuah of Zechariah, the Nevuah of Zechariah wouldn't be rebuilt. But now that we're seeing before our eyes that the prophecy of Yerushalayim being destroyed, the fact that there are foxes walking on the Kodesh Kodashim, that came true, the Yadush Nevuah of Zechariah. So now I know that the Nevuah saying that the prophecy saying that Yerushalayim will be rebuilt, I know that's also going to come true. Kalashon hazeh amrulo. Then they responded to him saying these words: Akiva nechamtanu, Akiva nechamtanu. Akiva, you have comforted us. Akiva, you have comforted us. This is the way that Gemara Makos ends, which is something noteworthy, that a Masechta all about Makos, all about lashes, that Klal Yisrael has experienced so many hardships, that it ends in a very appropriate way, that Akiva nechamtanu, that Akiva, you have comforted us. And this story is unbelievable that Rabbi Akiva was able to have such a perspective at that time. Take a look at this next Gemara. This is the third in the string of Gemaras that it tells us how Rabbi Akiva became the person that he became. This is a Gemara in Mesachas Brachos telling us of the last moments of Rabbi Akiva's life. At the time that they took Rabbi Akiva to kill him, to murder him, that he was captured by the Romans and they murdered Rabbi Akiva. Zman Kriya Shmahaya. It was the time to say the Shema. It was the time to say the Shema. I'm not sure if it was in the evening or in the morning, but regardless, it was the time to say the Shema. And they were combing his flesh with iron combs. The Romans were literally torturing him to death. And at that moment, at that moment, he said the Shema. And from here is the source that that the last words that are supposed to, that hopefully will be on a person's mouth before they pass away, is supposed to be Shema Yisrael, that at that moment they accept upon themselves, they commit themselves to God, to Torah. That is the last thing they do before they die. But the students that were there witnessing this torture, Amrulo Talmidav, they said, the students say to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbeinu, they say, our teacher, Avkam, like to this point, to this degree, a person needs to commit themselves. Amr lahem, he says to them, my entire life, I was nervous, I was troubled that I would never be able to fulfill the following commandment, where the Torah says, in Shema b'chol nafshecha, that we have to serve God with our entire soul, with our entire nefesh. Afilu notel es nishmasecha. Even at the time that they are literally removing the soul from you, they're removing your neshama, they're killing you, at that moment you have to commit yourself, you have to completely serve God with your entire soul. And my entire life, I was thinking I never be able to fulfill that mandate. I never, because no one ever thinks, God forbid, that they would be presented with a situation of dying al Kiddush Hashem. Amarti, so I say to myself, when is this opportunity going to present itself to me? Now that I'm actually presented with the opportunity to die al Kiddush Hashem and to have the words of Shema Yisrael on my lips as I'm being killed, now I'm not going to fulfill this mandate. And at that moment, he recited the Shema, and he died. What is the common denominator? What is the common character trait that we find, the common skill, I would even say, that we find within Rabbi Akiva? The fact that he was able to notice that the dripping of water on this rock, and that was motivating enough to him to go and become to go and learn Torah, because Torah that's hard like steel is able to penetrate something that's soft like his heart, and the fact that when he was with his friends going to Yerushalayim, that they see the fox walking, and he's able to say to himself, listen, the fact that the nevuah of Uriah came true, therefore I know for a fact that the nevuah of Zachariah is going to come true, and therefore he's able to comfort his friends. And the fact that the very last moment of his life, he was able to die al Kiddush Hashem in the most elevated fashion, with the word Shema Yisrael on his lips, being Makabel al Malchus Shemayim, reaffirming himself to Torah mitzvos. What's the common theme here? The common theme here is that Rabbi Akiva was always looking to see what is the potential of this moment. What am I supposed to be learning here? What am I supposed to be taking from this? He was always searching. He was always thinking. This was the key to Rabbi Akiva. That every single thing, he didn't look at it in a concrete manner. He didn't look at it with a tunnel vision. He didn't look at it just for the way it was presenting itself. But every single moment, he went to the depth of, what is this trying to teach me? Most of us look at wells and we take it for granted. Okay, fine, we understand the science of it, and that, okay, good, that's good enough. Most of us would cry as well, as many of us do on Tisha B'Av, when we cry over the destruction of the temple. And if we were to ever see a fox walking over the Temple Mount, every time we see the Iron Dome, tears fill our eyes. On Har Bayis, there's such terrible activities taking place. And can you imagine that Rabbi Akiva's entire life, Kol Yamai Hayisi Mitzdayer, my entire life, I was nervous I'd never be able to fulfill the mandate of dying al Kiddush Hashem. And then when the opportunity presents itself, he was able to dig past just the concrete episode to figure out, what am I supposed to learn from here? The key to success, the key to being able to walk in a base medrash, commit yourself and actually walk out becoming a Rabbi Akiva, is not just simply going through the motions of learning, not just simply going through the motions of a Shavuos, where we're able to recommit ourselves to Torah and to learn. Okay, it's all wonderful, but what are we going to do with it? To be able to look past just the concrete information, the black and white information, to see what the black and white episode, to see the depths of it, to find the potential within it. That this is a bracha that Talmidei Chachamim give one another. The Gemara in Brachos and Daf Yud Zayin tells us that this is a bracha that Talmidei Chachamim give to one another, that they should be able to have this kind of a perspective. That when rabbis would leave the house of Rabbi Ami, Amri Le, Rabbi Ami would say to them, of Amri Rabbi Chanina, and some say it was from the house of Rabbi Chanina, Amri Le, they would say to each other, Hachi olamecha tire bechayecha. They would say the following: they say olamecha tire bechayecha, that you should be able to see your world in your lifetime. What does this mean? See your world in your lifetime. What kind of bracha is that? So the Panim Yafos was written by Reb Pinchas Halevi Horowitz, who was a 18th century Yeki Posek. He was also a Kabbalist. He was one of the students. He was one of the teachers of the Chassam Sofer. Rav Moshe Sofer was the Rav in Petr in Frankfurt, and then he went on to Petersburg in the Oberlander region of Slovakia and Hungary. So the Chassam Sofer was a student by the Panim Yafos. He also wrote a sefer on a couple Masechtas and also on Shulchan Aruch called the Sefer Hafla. He was a Kabbalist, and he requested the Chassam Sofer come learn by him for just 1 year. And that year that Chassam Sofer said was an unbelievable year learning by the Hafla, learning by the Panim Yafos or Pinchas Halevi Horowitz. He explains that what is this blessing of Olamecha Tira Bechayecha, that they would give each other a blessing. You should see your world in your lifetime. That during your lifetime, you should be able to dig past the surface of the concrete world that's in front of you. To be able to open up, to expand. That it's not just that we learn a simple Gemara where the Gemara says, oh, great, they gave them a blessing, Olamecha Tira Bechayecha. But rather, we're going to dig past that. What does this actually mean? What is this blessing? The blessing is that they should be able to dig past, to dig deep, to be able to gain deeper understandings. I was just talking with Dr. Lankin about this. That the sixth question that we have when we go to that when we go before the Beis Din Shalmala, the sixth question that we're asked, aside for the famous ones of Asakta B'Pri Rivia, where you're involved in Torah education and raising the next generation of the Jewish people, Kavati Itam Torah, did you set aside time for learning Torah? Were you involved in business honestly? Were Tzipita Yeshua? All of these, very basic fundamental ideas. And then the last one, the sixth of the questions is, Havanta Davar Mitoch Davar. Were you able to learn one thing from another thing? That's so fundamental. We're learning that Rabbi Akiva modeled how fundamental it is. Because without being able to dig past the surface of a situation, a scenario, something that life presents you with, and of course in Torah study. So then all you're going to do is just look at the surface. When you go beyond the surface, though, so that's when the Gemara, the Tosas and Ksubis comes in, where the Tosas and Ksubis is able to teach us that when someone walks into the Beis Medrash with this kind of a mentality, so then it's Shenase Adam Gadol. It's not even a question. It's the derechu. That is what happens. That when you go in the Beis Medrash with this kind of a perspective, then you become a Rabbi Akiva. And when you walk through life with this kind of a perspective, you can become a Rabbi Akiva. And that's our goal, especially as we approach Shavuos. This is our goal. This is what we have to keep in mind. That how are we making how are we learning the most from our Torah studies? How are we allowing it to penetrate us? And the way to do that is by digging deep, to understand beyond the surface. Okay, this is the great Rabbi Akiva, the great decider, Rabbi Akiva. And there's a reason that he became even someone greater than Talmid Chacham, potentially even greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. All right, we'll stop here for this evening. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to stay on for a couple minutes. Again, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Devorah and Yuri for sponsoring, and my parents in sponsoring in memory of my grandfather. The Neshama Shavan Aliyah, and of course we thank you and Devorah and Yuri for sponsoring to give a little bit of Hakar Satov, and we have Hakar Satov right back for everyone joining together and learning together, so that we can dig behind the surface all together. All right, we'll stop here. I'm happy to stay on for a couple minutes if anyone has questions.